The galaxy was wide, endless, and full of life. Countless worlds spun around burning stars, each carrying strange creatures and intelligent minds. Some were gentle, living in peace under blue skies and green fields. Others were clever, building empires that stretched across systems. But there was one race, feared by all others. They called themselves the only monsters of the stars. Their homeworld was no paradise. It was a prison made of fire and poison. The skies were heavy with toxic storms. The seas boiled with acid tides, and the land was covered with creatures that could tear through steel. Even their plants were killers, lashing out with thorns and venom. It was a world where the weak died in moments, and only the ruthless survived. The galaxy called such worlds death worlds, places too cruel, too violent for most species to even visit. But this race, these monsters, were born there. They did not only survive, they thrived. Every other species kept their distance. Traders avoided their space. Armies built walls of defense in the stars. Children were told stories at night. Behave, or the monsters will come. And the monsters loved it. They believed they were alone at the top. The strongest, the most dangerous, the only predators worthy of fear. For centuries, no one had dared challenge them. They spread across the stars, claiming system after system, their reputation enough to win battles before they even began. But pride is dangerous, and pride often blinds. One cycle, their deep space scanners caught something strange. A signal, weak, broken, but carrying a pattern. Not natural, artificial. A message sent from somewhere in the forgotten dark. The monsters of the stars had explored that region long ago. According to their charts, it was nothing but empty systems, dead planets, and cold rocks. Yet the signal pulsed steadily, a quiet heartbeat across the void. At first, they ignored it. Perhaps it was the last breath of some old machine drifting aimlessly. But then, other signals followed, small bursts like footsteps in the dark. Something, or someone, was alive out there. The whispers began. It could be a lost colony. It could be prey hiding in the shadows. But one voice spoke words that silenced the rest. What if it is another monster? The idea spread through their people like wildfire. Another monster? Impossible. For ages, they had believed themselves unique. No other race could endure what they had endured. No other species could rise from a world of death and carve a place in the stars. But still. The signal pulsed. The High Council gathered. Warriors and leaders, scarred by battles and hardened by centuries of survival, sat in the great chamber of black stone. They listened to the recordings, the broken language carried through space. None of them understood it, but they all felt the weight behind it. It was not the cry of the weak. It was not the desperate call of prey. It was something else, something dangerous. The decision was made. A fleet would be sent. Warships, fast and armed, would cross the stars to find the source of this signal. They expected to crush whatever lay at the other end, to prove, once again, that they were the only true monsters. Yet deep inside, behind their confident words and sharpened claws, a small spark of fear began to grow. What if they were wrong? What if the galaxy had room for more than one monster? The fleet launched, engines burning blue fire against the darkness. Soldiers laughed and shouted, but their eyes stayed sharp. They wanted to believe this mission would end as always, with victory, with blood, with another reminder that they stood above all others. But the whispers would not stop. Even the youngest warriors felt it. The signal was not random. It was not weak. It carried something powerful, something patient, something waiting to be found. As the warships crossed into the unknown region, the silence of space grew heavier. Systems that should have been empty now showed traces of life. Broken satellites drifting, burned wreckage orbiting dead worlds, scars of battles no one remembered. The monsters began to wonder, were they the hunters? Or were they stepping into another hunter's territory? And then, one night, under the cold light of distant stars, the signal changed. It grew stronger, sharper. It no longer sounded like a broken machine. It was a voice. The bridge crew froze. The message repeated again and again in a tongue they could not understand. Yet the tone was clear, steady, unshaken, unafraid. A chill ran through even the bravest hearts. The galaxy had whispered about them for centuries. The monsters, the killers, the predators of the stars. But now, something whispered back, and it did not sound afraid. For the first time in their history, the monsters of the galaxy felt doubt. They had ruled unchallenged. They had believed they were the only ones born from a world of death. But somewhere out there, hidden in the darkness, another monster had awakened. The fleet pressed on, into the unknown. And though none would admit it, every soldier knew the truth. Whatever they found at the end of that signal would change the galaxy forever. The fleet of monsters cut through the dark, their warships glowing like burning knives against the endless void. Inside, soldiers prepared themselves with the same rituals they always had, sharpening blades, checking rifles, laughing to hide their unease. They told each other it would be the same as before. Another weak species, another hunt, another victory. But the whispers from Part 1 lingered. The signal was stronger now, guiding them like a trail of blood across the stars. No one could ignore the steady beat of its call. It was not the panicked scream of prey. It was not the desperate cry of the dying. It was too calm, too deliberate. Something was waiting. At last, the fleet reached the source, a pale sun circling two frozen planets. The third planet was scarred, its surface burned and broken, as though it had survived wars long forgotten. From orbit, it looked almost dead. No shining cities, no towers of steel, only oceans, mountains, and empty land. But the signal came from there. The commanders ordered scouts down to the surface. Dropships cut through the atmosphere, engines leaving fire trails across the sky. Soldiers joked about finding nothing but ruins, about dragging corpses back to their ships. They laughed loud, but their hands stayed tight on their weapons. When the dropships landed, the truth revealed itself. The world was not empty. The scouts found strange structures rising from the ground. Not glass towers, not machines of alien design, but something raw. Walls of stone, metal skeletons, cities that looked like they had been destroyed and rebuilt 100 times. The planet smelled of fire, smoke, and iron, and then they saw them, humans. At first, the monsters could not believe what they were seeing. These creatures were small compared to them, their skin soft, their bodies fragile. They wore simple armor, carried weapons made of steel and gunpowder instead of plasma and energy. Some even fought with blades. By all logic, they should have been prey. But when the soldiers moved closer, the humans did not run. They stood their ground, their eyes, strange and sharp, locked onto the invaders without fear. Some even smiled as if they had been waiting for this moment. The first clash was brutal. An alien warrior, 3 times the size of a man, charged forward with claws sharp enough to tear through stone. He expected screams, begging, retreat. Instead, the human raised his weapon and fired. The shot echoed like thunder. The alien stumbled but kept moving. The human did not fall back. He fought, steel against claw, fire against flesh. The human bled, but he did not stop. Blow after blow, he refused to yield. And when the dust cleared, the alien lay broken in the dirt, and the human still breathed. The watching monsters fell silent. This was not how it was supposed to be. The reports came quickly. Other scouts faced the same resistance. Small human groups ambushed them, using the land as their weapon. They struck from shadows, vanished into the trees, set traps that cut down even the strongest warriors. Every battle should have been easy, but it was not. The commanders tried to explain it away. They are stubborn prey, they said. They will break soon. But deep down, the soldiers knew better. These were not prey. These were survivors. The monsters studied them closer. Humans adapted to the cold nights and burning days as if they had always lived there. They drank water that would have poisoned others. They ate food too bitter, too tough, and yet grew stronger from it. Their bodies scarred quickly, healed fast, and even their pain seemed to fuel them. It made no sense. By appearance alone, they were weak. But their will was something else entirely. The monsters began to whisper again. Not of victory, not of glory, but of fear. Who were these creatures? How had they survived on a broken world with so little? And why did they fight as if death itself was only an obstacle, not an end? Back on the flagship, the High Commander watched the reports in silence. His claws tapped the table as he studied the images of humans staring back at the camera. Their eyes unsettled him most of all. They were not the eyes of prey. They were not even the eyes of rivals. They were the eyes of predators. And for the first time in centuries, the monsters realized the truth. They had not discovered prey. They had discovered something like themselves, something dangerous, something patient, something that could endure pain, loss, and endless struggle, and rise stronger each time. The High Commander stood and gave his order. The fleet would not retreat. They would test these humans, push them, break them, prove once and for all that there could only be one true monster in the galaxy. But deep inside, hidden even from himself, he already feared the outcome. Because when the first human stood unbroken after facing a monster 3 times his size, the galaxy changed, and though no one spoke it aloud, the thought grew in every heart. Perhaps. We are no longer the only monsters among the stars. The first battles with humans had left the monsters unsettled. They were not used to doubt. For centuries, their victories had been certain. Their enemies either fled or died. But these humans, they fought differently. Fragile in body, yet unyielding in spirit. The High Council wanted answers. Were humans truly monsters like them, or was it just luck, chance, stubbornness? The commanders needed proof, and so they devised a test. A world was chosen, a place no living thing should survive. Its surface was broken by storms that ripped apart steel. The air was thin, laced with poisons. The ground itself shifted with earthquakes and volcanic fire. Even machines sent there often failed within days. The decision was simple. Humans would be left on this death world. No weapons beyond the simplest tools. No food, no shelter. Nothing but their own strength. The commanders were confident. The humans might have survived small battles, but here, their weakness would be revealed. Here, the truth would be clear. The chosen humans were taken from their camps. Warriors, workers, even the young. They were thrown onto the planet's surface, left to face storms and fire alone. The monsters waited. On the first day, they watched the storms crash across the land. Lightning split the sky into burning rivers. Winds strong enough to snap trees hurled debris for miles. The monsters expected screams, chaos, death. But instead, they saw movement. Humans gathered. They did not scatter. They did not break apart. Together they found shelter in the cracks of stone cliffs. Together they built fires from wet wood, coaxing sparks to life with patience. Together they endured. By the 3rd day, many should have been dead. The planet's storms tore through the land endlessly. Poisonous rain fell in sheets, burning holes in metal. The monsters were certain no flesh could resist it. Yet the humans adapted. They wrapped themselves in layers of scavenged cloth. They dug trenches to direct the water away. They taught one another tricks, passing knowledge as quickly as breath. What one human learned, all of them learned. By the end of the first week, the monsters were silent. No one could believe what they were seeing. The humans had built shelter. Not strong walls of steel or advanced machines, no. They used stone, wood, even the bones of creatures they had hunted on the planet. They worked with their bare hands, bleeding but unbroken. And then came the moment that shook even the hardest hearts. On the 10th night, the storms grew worse. The ground cracked open with fire, and beasts rose from the fissures. Towering creatures with hides like armor, jaws filled with burning light. Even the monsters themselves would hesitate to face such things. But the humans, they fought together. They brought down one of the beasts. Spears made from sharpened stone struck its weak points. Traps hidden in the ground snapped its limbs. The battle was long, brutal, costly, but when it ended, the humans stood over the corpse of a creature no one else in the galaxy would dare approach. The watching commanders could not laugh anymore. Whispers filled the fleet. How do they survive this? No species adapts so quickly. This is not natural. By the end of the 2nd week, humans had transformed the death world. What was meant to be a graveyard had become their home. They built villages in caves and forests, hunted the beasts that once hunted them, and even turned the poisons of the land into tools. The test had failed. Instead of breaking them, it had revealed something terrifying. Humans did not just survive challenges. They grew stronger because of them. Every storm, every battle, every wound only forged them harder. Where most species grew weaker under pressure, humans adapted, changed, and endured. The High Commander stared at the reports, his claws trembling against the steel table. The evidence was clear. These creatures were not fragile. They were not weak. They were monsters. Different, yes, but monsters all the same, and in some ways, even worse. Because where the alien monsters had been born into their death world and shaped by it, humans carried their death world with them. No matter where they were thrown, desert, storm, or poison, they found a way to endure. For the first time in centuries, the Council admitted fear. If they can survive this, one elder whispered, what can they not survive? The High Commander had no answer, but in his heart, he already knew. The galaxy had changed the moment humans were discovered, and with every test, every trial, it became clearer. The monsters of the stars were not alone anymore, and perhaps soon they would no longer be the strongest. The test should have ended the question, but instead, it created more fear than answers. The monsters of the stars had watched humans walk through storms, hunt beasts of fire, and carve homes out of poison and stone. No species should have endured that trial. Yet the humans had not only survived, they had thrived. Now the Council wanted to know why. So the interrogations began. Captured humans were brought before the commanders, questioned through translators, studied with machines. The monsters expected lies, resistance, silence. But what they learned was far worse. The truth of humanity's past. At first, it seemed impossible. The humans explained their world, the place they called Earth. It was not a paradise, not even close. They spoke of burning deserts where people crossed with nothing but skin and bone. They spoke of frozen tundras where hunters chased prey across endless ice. They spoke of mountains that reached above the skies, oceans that swallowed ships whole, storms that drowned entire cities. The monsters listened in silence. Earth itself was a death world. But the story did not end there. The humans spoke of predators, beasts with fangs, claws, venom, strength, creatures that should have been the rulers of their planet. Yet somehow humans had fought them, outlasted them, driven them back, not with claws or armor, but with fire, with tools, with unbroken will. Then came the part that unsettled even the bravest warriors. Humans had not only fought the world, they had fought each other. Wars that burned continents. Armies that clashed with steel, fire, and poison. Cities reduced to ash. Generations raised in endless struggle. Empires rising and falling like waves on the ocean. Again and again, humanity had turned its rage inward, and yet they survived. Not just survived, they advanced. Every war gave them new weapons. Every disaster forced them to grow smarter, stronger, harder. One human prisoner, scarred and beaten, said it with a bitter smile. Our greatest enemy has always been ourselves. And still, we are here. The chamber fell silent. Even the Council, who had seen 1,000 wars, felt a cold weight in their chests, because they understood what this meant. Most species that faced constant death broke apart, faded into extinction. But humans, struggle was not their weakness. It was their fuel. Every trial forged them sharper. Every loss taught them endurance. And then the final revelation came. The monsters asked how many had died in these endless struggles. Famines, plagues, wars. The humans gave numbers so vast they seemed unreal. Millions upon millions, entire populations erased by fire, disease, or hunger. The monsters recoiled. To them, such loss would have destroyed their kind. But the humans only shrugged. We endure, they said. We always endure. Whispers spread quickly through the fleet. Soldiers spoke in hushed tones, afraid to admit the thoughts that haunted them. If they can survive their own world, what chance do we have? If they can kill each other by the millions, what would they do to us? Perhaps we were never the only monsters. Perhaps we were only the loudest. The council tried to silence the fear. They declared humans dangerous, yes, but still inferior. Fragile bodies, short lives, primitive tools. They told their warriors that these stories were exaggerated, human pride twisted into legend. But deep down, they all knew the truth. They had seen humans bleed and keep fighting. They had seen humans adapt to poison, storms, and fire, and now they understood why. Humanity was not born in peace. They were not shaped by safety. They were carved by suffering, forged by endless conflict, hardened by loss. The galaxy had believed the monsters were unique, that only one race had clawed its way out of a death world strong enough to terrify the stars. But now they knew they were not unique. They had only been first. The High Commander stood at the edge of the viewing chamber, staring into the void. Behind him, the council argued, voices sharp and filled with denial, but the High Commander said nothing. His mind replayed the words of the scarred human. Our greatest enemy has always been ourselves, and in that silence he realized the most frightening truth of all. If humanity could survive itself, then there was nothing in the galaxy that could truly stop them. The monsters of the stars had built their empire on fear, but now, for the first time in history, they were the ones who feared, and the fear would only grow. Because humanity's story was not finished. It had only just begun. The council was divided. Some argued that humans were dangerous beyond reason, that they should be destroyed before they grew stronger. Others claimed that humans were still fragile, that their victories were accidents, not proof of true power. But whispers of fear had already spread through the fleets. Soldiers spoke of humans as if they were ghosts, weak to the eye yet impossible to kill. The High Commander knew that whispers alone could shatter an empire. Something had to be done. So he made a decision. If humans were truly monsters, they would prove it. If they were only stubborn prey, they would break under pressure. A duel would decide. The challenge was simple. The strongest warrior of the monsters would face a single human in combat. No armies, no weapons of mass destruction. Just two beings standing before the galaxy, proving which one deserved the title of Predator. The choice of champion was easy. Korath, the beast of the Nine Wars, a giant among giants. His claws had shredded armored tanks. His jaws had torn through steel plating. He had never been defeated. When Korath entered the chamber, the ground shook beneath his steps. His armor was dark, scarred with the marks of 100 battles. His eyes glowed with the hunger of a killer. The audience of monsters roared. Their faith returned. This duel would end the whispers. This duel would end the doubt. But then, the human stepped forward. He was not large. His body was thin, scarred, and bruised from the trials he had already faced. His armor was simple, patched and worn. His weapon was nothing more than a blade and a rifle. Scratched with age, the crowd laughed at the sight. This fragile creature was no monster. This would be nothing but slaughter. The duel began. Korath struck first. A swipe of claws, fast as lightning, strong enough to crush bone. The human dodged, barely. He rolled across the dirt, his blade flashing to parry the next strike. The sound of metal against claw echoed through the chamber. The human was thrown back, stumbling, but he did not fall. Again, Korath attacked. Again, the human resisted. His body bent, twisted, bruised, but always returned. Minutes passed. Then an hour. The crowd grew restless. By now, any prey should have been nothing but blood beneath Korath's claws. Yet this human refused to die. Sweat poured from his skin. His breathing was heavy. His body was bleeding from a dozen wounds. But his eyes still burned with fire, and with every moment he moved smarter. At first, he had only dodged. Then he began to block. Then to counter. Slowly, he learned Korath's rhythm, the timing of his strikes, the weakness in his stance. Every mistake became a lesson. Every wound became knowledge. Where most species broke under pain, the human grew sharper. At last, the moment came. Korath charged with a roar, claws wide, certain of victory. The human did not dodge this time. He stepped forward, slipping inside the monster's guard. and drove his blade deep into the weak point beneath Korath's arm. The giant froze. The chamber went silent, and then, with a crash like thunder, the undefeated champion of the monsters fell. For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The human stood, chest rising and falling, blood dripping from his wounds. He was broken, scarred, barely holding himself upright. But he was alive, and victorious. The crowd that had laughed at his arrival now stared in silence, fear creeping into their hearts. Their greatest warrior, their symbol of power, had fallen to a creature they once called fragile. The High Commander clenched his fists. He wanted to deny what he had seen, to call it trickery, luck, accident. But deep inside, he knew the truth. This was no accident. This was what humans were, not the strongest, not the fastest, not the largest, but relentless, patient, enduring. They did not need to win with strength alone. They won with persistence, with cunning, with the refusal to ever give up. The duel had proven it to all. Humans were not prey. They were predators, monsters hiding inside fragile shells. That night, the whispers grew louder than ever. Soldiers who had once believed in their own supremacy now spoke the human's name with awe and dread. If one of them can kill Korath, what could an army do? What if they all fight like this? What if they grow stronger with every battle? The High Commander stood alone in his chamber, staring at the stars. The duel had given him the answer he sought, but it was not the answer he wanted. Humans had proven themselves. They were monsters, and soon the galaxy would learn to fear them. The duel was supposed to silence the whispers. Instead, it made them louder. Every soldier, every commander, every voice in the Empire had seen what happened. Their greatest champion, undefeated for centuries, had fallen to a single human, fragile in body, bleeding from a dozen wounds, yet still standing when the monster lay broken. The image burned itself into the minds of all who witnessed it. Humans were not prey. They were predators. At first, the council tried to calm the storm. They told their people it was chance, luck, a fluke of battle. They reminded them that humans were still weak, still young, still unworthy of true fear. But the soldiers had seen too much. And what they saw next only deepened the dread. Reports arrived from the outer fleets. Scouts and patrols who encountered humans returned with stories that chilled even the bravest. One scout told of a human soldier who had been struck down, his chest torn open, his blood pouring into the dust. Yet hours later, the human staggered back to his feet, wounds bound by nothing but rags, and returned to the fight. Another spoke of humans adapting to alien food, drinking water filled with minerals that poisoned others. Instead of falling sick, they grew stronger. Others described humans breathing thin air that choked other species, or walking under heavy gravity that snapped alien bones. Every report carried the same message: humans did not break. They adapted. The High Commander read these reports in silence, his claws tapping against the steel table. He wanted to dismiss them, to call them exaggerations from frightened soldiers. But the patterns were clear. Every human weakness was only temporary. Every limit became a challenge they overcame. Where most species needed generations to adapt, humans adapted in weeks, days, sometimes even hours. The truth was undeniable. Humans were not the strongest. They were not the fastest. They were not the most advanced, but they were the most dangerous, because nothing stopped them for long. Fear began to twist into something darker. Dread. For centuries, the monsters had lived as the galaxy's apex predators. Others feared them, respected them, obeyed them. Their power had been absolute. But now, for the first time, they looked into the eyes of another species and saw something horrifying. The same hunger they carried themselves, the same refusal to bow, the same fire to dominate, but worse. Humans carried something the monsters had lost long: ego adaptability. The ability to become stronger through every wound, every trial, every failure. The monsters had grown too used to victory, too certain of their strength, Too confident in their fearsome name, humans, on the other hand, had lived their entire history in struggle. Their whole existence was a chain of survival against impossible odds. The monsters had been born into fear, but humans had been forged by it. Whispers filled the empire. They heal too quickly. They eat poison like food. They fight like death itself does not matter. And the worst whisper of all, if they can survive anything, then how do we stop them? The council argued endlessly. Some demanded extermination, a full war to erase humanity before they grew too strong. Others feared that war would only teach humans faster, only make them harder to kill. The High Commander said little. He only remembered the duel. The humans standing covered in blood, eyes burning with a fire no defeat could extinguish. He had seen predators before, but never one like that. Meanwhile, on the outer colonies, humans continued to spread. They did not conquer with fleets or weapons of mass destruction. They simply survived. Worlds where no one else could live became theirs. Worlds abandoned as too toxic, too storm-ridden, too broken. Humans made homes there. And every time they survived, every time they adapted, the galaxy grew more afraid, for the monsters knew what was coming. A species that could survive anything would not remain in the shadows forever. They would rise. They would expand. And when they did, nothing could hold them back. The High Commander looked out over the stars, his reflection faint in the glass. His people still roared of victory, still claimed to be the only monsters. But he no longer believed it, because he had seen the truth. The galaxy was changing. The predators who once ruled unchallenged now faced something new, something worse, humans, and the dread. In his chest told him one thing above all. The age of monsters was not ending, was only beginning. The galaxy was never quiet for long. While the Empire struggled with its new fear of humans, another power was watching. The Drax Dominion, a rival empire older than both humans and monsters, had been waiting for weakness. They saw confusion. They saw fear. They saw an opportunity, and they struck. It began at the border worlds. Fleets of black metal descended without warning, burning colonies, crushing defenses. Their ships were enormous, bristling with weapons. Their soldiers were merciless, leaving only ashes behind. The monsters of the Empire rushed to defend their territory. But even they struggled. For the first time in centuries, they met an enemy that matched their ferocity. Worlds fell in daze. The Council screamed for answers. The High Commander called for reinforcements. Panic spread, and in the middle of this chaos, a strange thing happened. The humans did not run. The Dominion expected them to scatter, to beg for protection. Instead, they fought. On one burning world, human soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder with monster warriors, holding the line against endless waves. The monsters were shocked. No one had ever fought beside them before. Allies usually crumbled, surrendered, or hid. But humans fought differently. Where monsters struck with brute force, humans used cunning. Where monsters roared with fury, humans stayed silent, eyes sharp, movements calculated. Where monsters broke under overwhelming fire, humans adapted, finding new ways to fight with whatever they had. A monster soldier later said, voice trembling, "We thought we were the only monsters." But in battle, the humans were worse. The Dominion soon learned the same lesson. They captured a human outpost, leaving the survivors buried under rubble. Days later, those same survivors crawled from the ruins, faces covered in ash, weapons scavenged from wreckage. They launched raids at night, cutting supply lines, burning fuel depots, vanishing before dawn. One commander wrote in his final log, "We killed them once. Why are they still here?" The monsters of the Empire began to see the truth with their own eyes. Humans did not fight for glory. They did not fight for conquest. They fought like survival itself was a weapon. Every loss made them smarter. Every wound made them harder. Every battle made them stronger. And while the Dominion burned, the humans grew. The High Commander watched reports flood in. In battle after battle, humans were not just surviving. They were turning the tide. Small units of humans held positions that entire legions had abandoned. Human fleets, though smaller, struck with terrifying precision, using ambushes and traps that no one had expected. And when monsters and humans fought side by side, something terrifying happened. They won. The Dominion could not understand it. They had faced the Empire's monsters before. They knew how to counter brute strength and raw fury. But humans added something new, something unpredictable. Patience, endurance, relentless will. They fought like prey that had learned to kill predators. And it broke the Dominion strategies apart. But for the Empire's monsters, victory came with a cost. Because as they fought alongside humans, they realized something chilling. The humans were learning too quickly. Every tactic, every weakness, every strength, the humans absorbed it all. And deep inside, the monsters understood. When this war ended, humans would not remain allies. They would become the greatest rival the galaxy had ever known. On the war-torn front lines, a monster captain stood beside a human soldier. Both were covered in blood and ash, both still alive when they should have been dead. The captain muttered, "We thought we were the only monsters in the stars." The human only stared at the burning horizon and replied, "You were wrong. The war of monsters had begun." But no one could tell who the real monsters were anymore. The war burned across the stars. The Drax Dominion fought with endless ships and endless soldiers. The Empire's monsters fought with fury. And the humans fought with something no one could name. At first they were seen as weak, then as survivors. Now they were something else entirely, something new, something terrifying. Every world turned into a graveyard. Ashes covered cities. Skies burned red. Fleets died in silence, drifting across the void. And yet, when the smoke cleared, when all should have been lost, the humans were still there. They always returned, always adapted, always endured. The Dominion could not understand it. They threw storms of fire, weapons strong enough to shatter moons, plagues designed to kill whole races. And still, humans came back. A Dominion warlord spoke in rage before his execution. "They do not fight like mortals. They fight like death itself wears their skin." The Empire's monsters had believed themselves unmatched. For centuries, they ruled with fear. But now even they began to whisper. The humans were not like them. The monsters killed to dominate. The humans killed to survive, and survival was a weapon no one could counter. On the battlefield, alliances that once seemed impossible were now forged in blood. Monster warriors fought back to back with human soldiers, each learning from the other, each feeding the other's strength. But behind the victories was a shadow. The High Commander saw it clearly. Every time humans survived, they grew stronger. Every battle carved them into something sharper, harder, deadlier. The Dominion was not just teaching them to fight. It was forging them into the greatest predators the galaxy had ever seen. The commander whispered to himself, claws trembling, "We may win this war, but lose everything else." The final battle came on a world of storms, a place where lightning split the skies and rivers of fire burned through the ground. No sane species would ever set foot there. But the Dominion came in force, desperate for one last victory, and the humans followed. The monsters had called their world a death world. But as the High Commander watched humans move through fire and storm as if they had been born for it, he realized the truth. Every world was a death world for them, and they had conquered them all. The battle was brutal. The Dominion unleashed everything: plasma storms, swarms of machines, horrors pulled from their darkest labs, and the humans broke through. Not with strength, not with size, but with will. They did not stop when burned. They did not stop when broken. They did not stop at all. When the Dominion fell, it was not to the Empire's monsters. It was to humanity. Silence followed the end of war. The galaxy looked at the humans differently now. Not as prey, not even as allies, but as something far worse. Because the humans had survived what no one else could. And survival had changed them. They were no longer just another race. They were monsters, too. In the great hall of the Empire, the council gathered. The High Commander stood before them, his armor scarred, his eyes heavy. "We believed," he said slowly, "that we were the only monsters of the stars. We believed no one could match us. No one could endure what we endured. We were wrong. He turned, staring at the humans who stood at the edge of the chamber. Their faces calm, their eyes sharp, their presence heavy like the weight of a storm. "They have shown us the truth," the commander whispered. "The galaxy does not belong to us anymore. It belongs to those who can survive anything." And all across the chamber, in silence deeper than death, the realization spread. The monsters were no longer alone. The humans had joined them, but the final dread came with one thought none dared to speak. If humans could survive anything, what would they become when survival was no longer enough? The story ended, but the fear did not, because the galaxy had not just met another monster. It had unleashed the deadliest one of all.